no foreign plot to kill President Trump was involved in Thomas Crook's assassination attempt. This is according to the FBI. FBI Director Kash Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino sat down in an exclusive interview with Fox News Digital, and they also said that there was no motive. So we're going to get into that and everything that they had to say. Also, a Nashville man who doesn't work, is able-bodied, has no kids. He's very upset about his SNAP benefits coming to an end. I'm not. This is exactly what I voted for, but we're going to play it's hilarious, the video, but it's also kind of sad that, we've been paying for this. The taxpayer has been paying for this kind of stuff for so long. Also, I have got Daily Wire White House correspondent Mary Margaret Olohan on deck. We are discussing those viral Oval Office moments with Mayor-elect Mamdani and President Trump from last week. We're also discussing Thanksgiving traditions to expect this week, maybe some turkey pardoning. Also, what's the latest on the White House East Wing construction that keeps blowing the brains of liberals everywhere? And also dispelling some of those divorce rumors circulating about the Vance family and so much more. So stay tuned. I also love me being taped onto Vince's body. That's also a very good look. Vince, you've never looked better. But on a serious note, the FBI did give the American people some details about Thomas Crooks. He was the would-be assassin that wanted to take out President Trump on July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania. I remember that moment. This is like a where were you when kind of a moment. I remember getting a phone call from my friend. You have to turn on Fox News right now. That's what she said. And I said, why? I was actually getting ready for my own birthday party. And she said, President Trump has just been shot. And nobody knows what happened. Like he's on the ground right now. So I know that I'm not alone when my stomach dropped when I got that call and when I turned on the TV and I saw, President Trump on the ground. I saw him get up with the blood on his face. Obviously, the fight that essentially delivered him the presidency in 2024. I think that was the moment that solidified President Trump being president again. But we're very lucky that President Trump is here. Just because he survived doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of unanswered questions, or at least until now. So the FBI Director Kash Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino, they dispelled some rumors about this incident, and they also delivered some more information about Thomas Crooks and maybe why he did this. So they sat down. It wasn't just FBI Director Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino. There was also a senior FBI official there with them who did this sit down with Brooke Singman for Fox News Digital. And this senior official has direct involvement in this Butler, Pennsylvania investigation. And this is a massive investigation. And I think I always say this on my show, but real life is not a Criminal Minds episode. Real life is not an NCIS episode where it's just so great. You turn on Law and Order and they solve it in 20 minutes plus commercial breaks. We get all the answers and there's a nice little bow tied up on it. Real life is not like that. And especially a case of this caliber where the president of the United States was shot in the head. This takes time, and certainly based on what we've gotten from this interview, we can see how hard that they've dug into this. So FBI Director Patel said that President Trump has been fully briefed on this. He is the victim in this case, and they have provided him with all of the details of the investigation, and the president was satisfied with the results and where we left it. I think this question stemmed from Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, getting a question recently about whether or not President Trump was satisfied with the investigation or satisfied with the information that he's gotten. And Caroline Leavitt said, I can't speak for him. I don't know. I think so, but I can't speak for him. You're going to have to answer that or have him answer that yourselves. So I think that's what prompted this question from Brooke Singman to the heads of the FBI, and they answered that question. If President Trump has all of the information that the FBI has, then He's probably satisfied, right? So then Deputy Director Bongino said that they have reviewed this case and looked into everything. They spoke to the families involved. They spoke to the president and said that there is no cover-up here, no FBI cover-up, no government cover-up, and there was no motive, no reason behind Thomas Crooks's shooting. Clearly, he disliked the president of the United States. Clearly, I think he had a distaste for the government in general, and we're going to get into some of what we learned from his social media posts. But clearly, if you're going to take someone out or you want to take someone out, you don't like them. But no motive, no official motive. And FBI Director Patel said that Christopher Wray, he had went to Congress and testified that he didn't know if it was a bullet that hit President Trump in the head. And he took a shot at, well, that's bad language. I'm not going to say that he took a shot at Christopher Wray, but he slammed Christopher Wray, I will say, for that. Because when the FBI director goes in front of Congress and says, well, I don't know what hit President Trump in the head, when clearly by the time he spoke to Congress, he did know, that sows a lot of chaos. It sows a lot of distrust among the American people for these three-letter agencies. What do you mean you didn't know that it was a bullet? So things like that, Kash Patel said that they were up against because the American people have no trust in what the government is saying, and that's bad. We're in a bad place. So now if the American people have this disbelief in this institution that he and Dan are now running, well, they've got a lot of work to do. They started off in the negatives, and now they've got to do a damn good job, which it seems like they are doing. So then, as I said, there was another unnamed FBI agent included in this interview, and he was unnamed partly because of the work that he does. He wants to remain private and safe, which makes sense, but he said this: the case currently sits in a pending inactive status. The official also called the investigation one of the largest mobilizations of FBI resources in history that frankly continue to this day. If we get a credible lead, we will continue to investigate. The director has been very clear about leaving no stone left unturned, and that's what we are committed to do. And the FBI took over the investigation hours after the shooting, and they did begin investigating it as an assassination attempt right away. But here are just some of the numbers that this unnamed FBI agent gave in this interview, which just goes to show how expansive this investigation is. 485 FBI employees are involved in this investigation. They conducted more than 1,000 interviews. They reviewed more than 2,000 tips that were submitted. More than 10 search warrants were executed. More than 100 subpoenas were served. They analyzed 13 electronic devices that were associated with Crooks and his family members. They went through his home in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. They did a full sweep of his home. The FBI examined 35 accounts linked to Thomas Crooks. That includes social media accounts, bank accounts, and other online accounts. And FBI Director Patel was dispelling more rumors that the FBI hadn't been able to access some of these accounts. He wanted to put those rumors to bed and say the FBI had access to every single one of those accounts, and they have gone through every single one. So they also found out that Thomas Crooks had foreign-based email accounts from Germany and Belgium, which is interesting. Foreign-based email accounts from Germany and Belgium. Why would a kid from Pennsylvania have email accounts based in other countries? But the unnamed FBI agent in this interview said that there was no foreign connection in this case. No individual outside the United States borders or inside the United States borders had any role in directing him, inspiring him, or assisting him in any way, including foreign governments. No information, he wanted to stress this, no information, no evidence anywhere in this investigation that shows there was a foreign individual or foreign government or foreign organization tied to Thomas Crooks. And FBI Deputy Director Bongino said that, why would they have cracked the biggest investigation in human history and withhold information from the American public? We are following the facts, and the facts are there was no foreign involvement, which is good to know. Because as we know, there were Iranian plots to kill President Trump. That is separate from this. That is separate from Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th. But he did leave behind some digital footprint which called for terrorism online. And this was when he was 16 years old. Just 16 years old, this guy was online 5 years before the assassination attempt, obsessed with political violence and obsessed with fighting the government with terrorism. He made searches about how far Oswald was from Kennedy during that assassination. He also searched for what the weather would be like in Butler, Pennsylvania on the day of the attack, where the podium would be, and he looked up directions from his home to where the rally was taking place in Butler, the Butler Farm Showgrounds, and then directions from the grounds to the closest hospital. Interesting. Maybe he wanted to know if he shot President Trump and he didn't die, would he be able to get help soon? Thankfully, he was. That's an interesting tidbit. He also went on a website called deviant.com. So we've been seeing a lot of this where these trans school shooters, they have these, like, they're obsessed with pornography. It makes them violent. And I think we're seeing a little bit of this here as well. But he was on this Deviant website and he was looking at animated pornography and also material related to the furry community. So with that said, he was also interested in like very buff females, muscle building erotica. But interestingly enough, no motive was left. Like no manifesto, didn't leave a letter, didn't leave anything, and nothing in his online search history or comments on YouTube or anything like that. They couldn't find anything that said, this is why I'm going to attack President Trump. This is why I want him dead. None of that. So no official motive, which is interesting as well. But it is the FBI's conclusion that Thomas Crooks acted alone. And the FBI can only investigate based on a lawful predicate to open. So what Kash Patel was explaining also in this interview was, could they have, seen these posts online? Could they have looked at his online activity and opened an investigation into him? Not really. Kash Patel argued that, the American public probably doesn't want the FBI scouring social media posts and content without a lawful predicate to do so, because that would trample First Amendment rights. But the FBI has maintained that if someone had called in a lead, they would have investigated that lead, but that didn't happen. But it is interesting to think about, if he was on YouTube and he said things like kill Democrats and members of the squad, like AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, he wrote that squad members should suffer a quick and painful death. So, he had some anti-Democrat posts, but also anti-Republican posts. He said that the only way to fight government with terrorism, and you could fight government with terrorism-style attacks. He wanted to sneak a bomb into an essential building and set it off before anyone sees you. He wanted to track down important people, politicians, military leaders, and try to assassinate them. So this is something that he was saying online, which I think begs the question, if the FBI was looking into something like this, could this have stopped? Could they have stopped this kind of attack? I don't know. And it poses an interesting question about red flags, like people calling in on their neighbors or their family members or their enemies, right? and constitutional rights. Like, what does that mean? Could someone have called the FBI and said, hey, my son is looking up things like this? Maybe. I remember during the Obama administration, when there were a bunch of ISIS attacks. This was just a few years ago, but I remember I was in high school and college during the Obama administration, and I feel like there was an ISIS terror attack all the time. And I remember every time there was a terror attack, these 3-letter agencies would come out and say, we were looking at this guy. He was on a terror watch list. And every time I would think to myself, well, you're not watching them closely enough, clearly. So clearly having the FBI or one of these 3-letter agencies keeping an eye on these people doesn't prevent attacks from happening. So, whether or not we want the FBI snooping at all of our business, which we don't, that doesn't prevent someone with the will to kill the president from attempting to do that. And you can't just throw people in jail because of speech, This is someone who's on YouTube saying he wants to assassinate politicians and military members and Jews and socialists and Democrats. Just across the board, like a very violent individual. So you can just say that online. Also, conservatives were banned from YouTube for talking about COVID. So it seems like there's a double standard here. But clearly American speech is being monitored and suppressed and censored if big tech giants don't like it. And we know that the Biden administration bullied Meta into suppressing narratives it didn't like, specifically with COVID-19. Mark Zuckerberg has since come out and said that, the Biden administration and their officials in the communications department, they would bully them over the phone. They would yell at them. Basically bullying them into submission and basically pushing narratives that they liked and suppressing narratives that it didn't. But I think, all threats obviously should be forwarded to law enforcement. And I do have faith that if a threat is forwarded to this FBI, they are going to run it down. Certainly. They have carried out an extensive investigation here. But, authorities, I want to move on now to this manhunt. There is a manhunt for the Slender Man stabber. If you remember this was back in 2014. I remember this. This was a crazy story about Morgan Geyser. This was a Wisconsin woman who was convicted in what we call the Slender Man stabbing. And Morgan and her friend, Anissa, they were 12 years old, just 12 years old, when they brought their friend Peyton into a wooded area during a sleepover and stabbed her 19 times. And now this woman is on the loose. Yep. She was? Oh, well, Morgan Geyser was captured this morning. However, the Madison Police Department put out this statement yesterday. Officers are searching for a woman who cut off her Department of Corrections monitoring bracelet and left a group home Saturday night. Morgan Geyser was last seen in an area of Cronky Drive around 8 p.m. with an adult acquaintance, but her whereabouts were unknown as of yesterday morning. But as Guy just informed me, she has been captured and found. But the interesting thing about this woman is that she was sent to a psychiatric hospital. She was not, she was basically, and this is very rare to be found like criminally insane. That is very difficult. And she was found criminally insane. Like, She went to a mental health facility, a psychiatric facility, and she's been in the Winnebago Mental Health Institute for the last 7 years. But she was granted release to live with her father and wear a GPS monitor, which is what she had cut off so that she could escape. She's been found. But a psychologist, Dr. Brooke Lundbaum, said earlier this year that Morgan Geyser is now identifying as a male. Yep. So this is a crazy person, obviously. You have to be so evil. There has to be something so demonic in your heart to stab someone 19 times, especially at 12 years old. This is certainly someone who is troubled beyond my imagination. I don't know what could have happened to this little girl that she would stab another little girl 19 times. There's just no words to describe that kind of evil. And obviously there is something wrong with your brain. So it doesn't shock me that this girl, now a woman, a grown woman, is now identifying as a male. Also, when I read this, I thought, isn't it interesting how this stabber, this Slender Man stabber, this cold-blooded killer, has been in a mental institution for years, and she now identifies as a man? Isn't that interesting how that can happen while you've been in a psychiatric center for years? It just goes to show how disturbing the mental health industry has gotten, where you can go to a mental health facility for help and have your worst delusions affirmed rather than treated. Just doesn't give you a lot of hope. Shameless plug, on Nightly Scroll, I have an interview coming up this Wednesday with a mental health professional who is debunking the trans ideology. She says it is a social contagion, and clearly, as we just see with this woman, mentally ill, vulnerable, certainly troubled child, probably a troubled childhood. Turns out that you can go for help at a psychiatric center and be trans. Because that's what they do now. It is a social contagion, and it's a fascinating interview. So anyway, Nightly Scroll on Wednesday night, we can dive into this transgender ideology and all of that. But quickly, Chicago, crime-ridden Chicago. There were 2 deadly shootings at a Christmas tree lighting in Chicago in the Loop neighborhood, in that Loop, downtown Loop area. And a 14-year-old boy had a graze wound to his stomach. He was taken to a children's hospital. A 15-year-old boy had a graze wound to his left thigh. He was taken to another hospital. A 17-year-old boy had a graze wound to his left thigh. He was taken to a hospital. A 14-year-old girl was shot in the right hip. She was taken to another hospital. A 16-year-old boy was shot in the leg. He was taken to another hospital. A 14-year-old boy was shot in the leg. He's been listed in good condition. All of these teenagers have been listed in good condition. A 13-year-old was shot in the leg. She was taken to Lurie Children's Hospital. She's in fair condition. What? Now, apparently there were 300 juveniles who were rioting in the Loop at the time of the shooting. Not only that, Chicago PD, those officers were attacked and injured with mace and stun guns. Why are 300 juveniles running around with mace and stun guns at a Christmas tree lighting? Then, not even an hour later, officers responded to another shooting. 2 other people had been shot. A 14-year-old boy was shot and taken to Northwestern Hospital, where he died. A second victim, an 18-year-old man, was shot in the left thigh and was taken to Northwestern in serious condition. No one is in custody in connection with the second shooting. Now, this is in Chicago, where Governor J.B. Pritzker and Mayor Brandon Johnson, they don't want Trump's help, of course, to clean up this crime. They think that there's no issue here, nothing to see here, we don't need your help. Here is what Mayor Brandon Johnson said. Watch.
Our young people have to understand that they should not attend these unauthorized events that have been advertised on social media. They are extremely dangerous due to the number of individuals that may be carrying weapons. And as much progress as we have made, there are still far too many guns on our streets. For these young people who have engaged in these incidents, you have put yourselves and your friends at risk. Because of the reckless behavior of a few individuals, we have families devastated and our downtown residents are hesitant to leave their own homes. I'm the first person to recognize that we have more work to do in this city to provide safe spaces for our young people. But these type of violent gatherings can never be an alternative, nor can they be normalized. We need parents, guardians, and other responsible adults to do their best to accompany young people in large, unsanctioned gatherings where weapons are likely to be present. There's always more we as adults can do to make sure that we know where our kids are and what they are doing.
Yeah. It is not a gun problem. It is a culture problem. That's obvious. And I'm glad he called out parents. I'm glad he called out parents because when I was growing up, I remember my parents putting on the news, and everyone will remember this. It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? And if your children are at, a large unsanctioned gathering, a Christmas tree lighting, and they've got mace, they've got stun guns, they've got guns, and they're running amok and they're shooting people, that's a parenting problem also. It's not a gun problem, it's a culture problem, and it's a parenting problem. Something tells me that gun violence in Chicago, where hundreds of rioting teens are gathering, probably would have been inevitable, whether this was a sanctioned event or a small event or not. And again, that's a culture problem. Then he admits that the city has a long way to go. This comes just days after a woman was lit on fire on the subway. Brandon Johnson said that was just an isolated incident. Clearly, getting lit on fire might have been an isolated incident, but crime in the city is not. And like I said, he and Governor Pritzker refused the help of President Trump because they're playing politics and they're playing with the safety of their constituents. They don't care. They'll let all of this crime keep happening if it means they don't have to call on President Trump for help. They're not going to do that. They're too proud to do that. I wonder if hundreds of teens would have been rioting at a Christmas tree lighting if National Guard troops would have been deployed to that city. I wonder. Now, this next story that I want to tell you about, maybe I think that this is funny because I lived in Nashville for a little bit, and my next guest also lived in Nashville for a little bit. But this just goes to show how this SNAP benefits thing, this is what I voted for. I don't want people getting government-funded freebies. I don't want people getting government-funded food if they don't actually need it. These welfare programs are supposed to help you get back on your feet. This shouldn't be a long-term solution for you. And this guy, he doesn't have a job, nothing. Watch this. Number 9.
Nelson Scott is on the verge of losing access to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. He is 38, not disabled, doesn't have any kids, doesn't go to school, and doesn't have a job. Those are just some of the reasons he is no longer eligible for SNAP benefits.
How much did SNAP help you?
It helped me a lot. I get $292 a month.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture crackdown is led by President Trump, who signed the One Big Beautiful Bill into law in July. The government shutdown stalled the November 1st deadline for implementation. However, these changes are still coming up.
We help.
Signe Anderson is a senior director of nutrition advocacy with the Tennessee Justice Center.
Because of rules like this, we can see individuals that are going to be forced to skip meals.
She points out senior citizens and children between the age of 15 and 18 will be most impacted. Rick Williams is a conservative political analyst.
A 15 or 16-year-old can take care of themselves at home while you go work. There's no reason you can't be working. There are plenty of jobs out there.
Scott tells me as a convicted felon, getting a job isn't easy.
I will get one if y'all give me one. Y'all be felony friendly and hire us.
Interesting. Doesn't have a job, says that he can't get one. And that's our problem? Not anymore. And this guy will be happy to know that the Farm Bureau has predicted the lowest cost of Thanksgiving dinner in a few years. So let's take a look at this. We've got some new numbers here that back in 2023, under the Biden administration, Thanksgiving dinner cost $61.17. In 2024, went down a little bit, $58.08. And now, big jump, $55.18 on average for Thanksgiving dinner. You know, I will say, I'm not trying to, poo-poo the American Farm Bureau, but I'm bringing a side to Thanksgiving, and I went food shopping over the weekend, and I spent more than that on probably Brussels sprouts and my pancetta that I'm making, and I'm making dessert. So this is just an average, but I'm just saying, we could get these numbers down a little bit more. All right, I've got my friend Mary Margaret Olahan. She is White House correspondent for the Daily Wire right here with me. And Mary Margaret, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. I love being here.
This is so much fun. I love to see you. I miss you. If the audience doesn't know, Mary Margaret and I became friends when the Daily Wire hired her, moved her down to Nashville. I reached out to her right away and I said, we're going to be friends. And we went out to dinner and we were friends ever since. And now she's back in DC covering the White House, which is an incredible opportunity. I'm so proud of you. But it's Thanksgiving week. And I was just saying that prices are low. But the Thanksgiving at the White House, they have got some pretty interesting traditions. I know that it's customary for the president of the United States to pardon 2 turkeys to save their lives. So what do we have on deck at the White House this week?
Yes, so the turkey pardoning will be happening tomorrow. And, this has always been a quirky little tradition. I think we're used to it at this point. But it is kind of funny that the president of the United States will be choosing from several turkeys, which one's going to die and which one won't. Something I didn't really realize before I started this beat is that there's a little more that the first lady does that goes into this. So I think right now on X, she asked people for suggestions for names for the turkeys because they're naming them all. I think last year, I was just looking this up, the ones last year were named Peach and Blossom and Liberty, but currently Melania is taking suggestions for the turkeys. So you could be the lucky man or woman that names the turkey that gets slaughtered this year. So may the odds be ever in your favor.
I figured that they would probably already be named. They're towards the end of their life, potentially. You would think that they've already been named, but I guess we can ceremonially name them again and and kill them off or pardon them.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, look, this president and the first lady, I believe they'll be heading to Palm Beach at the end of the week, but they will be at the White House, as far as I know, for the Thanksgiving holiday. So thankfully, I will not. I am really looking forward to being home with my family, which actually where I am now. All of DC kind of flees. It's a little bit of a transitory place, right? It's a lot of transplants. Most people are not actually from DC. It's rare to meet people who are. But the president and the first lady, I believe, will be staying there for Thanksgiving and then heading to Palm Beach at the end of the week. They're heading into the Christmas season too. Melania, I know, has an event coming up where she's going to be meeting with military families, hoping to go to that. And the first lady has a Christmas tree event today as well. So we're really gearing up for the holidays in DC right now, and it's fun.
Holiday season. I can't wait to see the Christmas decorations that we know Melania doesn't like doing, but she does it anyway. I absolutely love it. It's holiday season in DC and in the swamp, so makes it look a little prettier. But, Friday was a big day at the Oval Office with that iconic meeting of Mayor-elect Mamdani and President Trump. I've never seen 2 men dislike each other more, smile so much at each other. They seemed like they were having fun anyway.
Oh my gosh. Well, Haley, I got to backtrack a little bit. I started that day at DCA, Ronald Reagan National Airport, because I got a tip that Mamdani would be arriving there. So I was waiting for him at the door where he was going to leave out. If we could see his, black SUVs outside the door. And we were waiting for him to talk to him. And when he came up the escalator, his team tried to say, no, he can't talk to you. But we did ask him a couple questions. I said, are you excited for your meeting with Trump? And he said someone else was there and asked him a policy question. And he basically was like, I can't think about anything except this meeting with Trump, which I thought was kind of interesting.
One track mind.
Yeah. And I mean, look, it was an intimidating meeting. So, I could be wrong, but I got the vibe that he was a little nervous for this. And then, of course, at the White House, the tension was so high among the press. I mean, only a few of us were able to go into the Oval Office. I wasn't that day. It wasn't my day. But the reporters who were in there were very lucky. And the rest of us were all just kind of like waiting around the White House, hoping that we could hear something. And we were also hoping that Mamdani would come out afterwards and do a gaggle with us. We were even hoping that Trump and Mamdani might come together. You never really know how that's going to go.
Right.
But they didn't. Spoiler alert. But we all set up. We staked out. If he had come out, I would have been like right in front of his face, I would have gotten some great questions. He didn't. And we're all just listening closely to this meeting and looking at each other like, oh my gosh, what is happening right now? Because, you have Mamdani, who called the president a fascist,
Right.
being called out for that by Jackie Heinrich with Fox News. And he literally just again reaffirms that he thinks Trump is a fascist, and Trump is kind of like, haha, it's fine. We know you called me that. We don't have to explain. And that interaction happened at least twice. So I think even the press in the Oval were kind of reeling from it. I know I was texting my team at Daily Wire, and we were kind of laughing about it, like we couldn't believe what was going on.
Yeah.
And my take was kind of that the president, he respects that Mamdani has this movement behind him, and so he wants to get along with him. He wants to make good changes for New York, and so he figures, why not get along with him? Why not have a good relationship insofar as you can? And we all know that if Mamdani makes a wrong move, he will be out of Trump's good graces. But for
Right.
now, seems like he's in a good spot.
Yeah, and New York City means a lot to the president. He's the president for everyone, but I think it has a very special place in his heart. He helped build that city. And I think he has a vested interest in having it not crumble and fall to socialism, or as close to socialism as you can get in this country.
Right.
And what's interesting is that I think Trump and Mamdani are more similar than dissimilar. And I'm not talking about their policies. Like on policy, they're so different. But they've got great, they're great in front of the camera. They've got charisma. They are different, and they are bringing something new to their respective parties. Where, President Trump, it was rhinos versus MAGA with President Trump. And I think we're going to see something similar with Mamdani ushering in this old guard Democrat Party versus this new progressive democratic socialism. And I think President Trump sees that a little bit.
I think he does. And, the president has always been very astute in analyzing his opponents, analyzing the scene at the time. So, most Republicans and most people on the right, if they were handling that meeting, would have gone into it ready to probably make some good TV, be very dramatic, get very angry, lecture him. And I think there were people that were hoping that would happen. And, maybe they're right about it. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe that would ultimately be better for the country. But the president has really good instincts. And I think in this instance, looked at the situation and thought, we're going to have a good relationship here rather than an antagonistic one. And you see that even by the way he was patting Mamdani's arm as he said, don't worry, it's okay that you called me a fascist. It's just the name of the game. Just really remarkable moments there. And, even some of these reporters brought it back again. They were like, so wait, you called him a fascist. Why are you here? Like, why do you want to interact with a president who is a fascist? And actually, if he had come out to the sticks to do a gaggle with us, I did want to ask him, look, your base genuinely thinks Trump is a fascist. You may be comfortable being in the Oval Office with this fascist, but your base truly thinks he is a fascist. Your base truly thinks that he wants to do horrible things to them. So are they going to be okay with the fact that you're palling around with this so-called fascist president in the Oval Office? I don't think so. But this is the card that he chose to play.
Yeah. And, I think it just goes to show how Democrats throw around these words and they don't really care too much about the real meaning of them. They call Republicans fascist. They call Trump Hitler. They call Elon Musk a Nazi. They call ICE officers the Gestapo. They kind of just run with this narrative that the right is this alt-right fascist Nazi Germany type party, when obviously it is not. But I think it just goes to show that they say it so much that they believe it, but they also say it so much that it loses its meaning. And I think that it is just that for them. It's just words. And they know that the current Republican Party isn't anything like that. But there's a lot going on at the White House right now, lots of construction, and not only construction with this new East Wing and ballroom, which I want to ask you about, but apparently last week and in weeks prior, President Trump has been on the aux, if you will. He's been blasting his own music. So here's a quick video of him, maybe, or someone else blasting the Phantom of the Opera outside the White House. Listen to this. spooky.
A little bit. A little bit.
So have you heard this in real life, or have you ever experienced, President Trump putting on the tunes?
Absolutely. I mean, I think anyone who covers the White House has heard it at this point. Sometimes you'll hear it, like from the position that video was taken in, which is, you come down Pebble Beach and you're right outside the briefing room. Like, yeah, you'll hear it there. But then there's other times when we'll go out to the new patio area where the Rose Garden used to be, and the tunes will be playing there. I think a good example of this is when I went to the honoring of Charlie Kirk for the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So everyone was out there on the patio, and this was, kind of a solemn service honoring Charlie, but at the same time, there was a little bit of a celebratory aspect, and it was supposed to, pump people up a little bit, make them happy to remember their friend. And so all the press is gathered at the back listening, and we've got like ABBA, Dancing Queen. We had, of course, God Bless the USA. We have all the classic Trump tunes playing over the loudspeakers in the Rose Garden. And you'll see too, and pictures of an empty Rose Garden with the speakers on, and Trump sticking his head out of the Oval Office and like enjoying it. He loves his music. He's a big fan of Phantom. He loves Les Mis. I think that was the first show at the Kennedy Center this year. And he's a man of the arts. He likes it. He likes the music. So everyone's used to hearing it at this point.
I think it's so funny. And, you don't think that President Trump would be such a, Broadway show connoisseur, but I guess so. But you brought up the Kennedy Center, so I wanted to ask you about this because a journalist Jamie Stein went to a symphony at the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, of course. And apparently the national anthem was playing ahead of performances, because that is something new under President Trump's leadership, that the national anthem will play before whatever you're seeing at the Kennedy Center. And this is what this liberal journo said. Readers, President Donald Trump's new regime at the beloved center decreed the National Symphony Orchestra must stand and play the national anthem before every concert. How dissonant. Ballparks and stadiums are fine venues for that tune, but classical music is an international language. This is just one more way Trump leaves his fingerprints on our city after tearing down the White House East Wing. Interesting that this person says that the national anthem is not fitting in this country before hearing classical music.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not surprised, frankly, Haley, because a lot of these journalists who are going to the Kennedy Center now are specifically going in order to find an issue with it. They don't like that the president and a lot of Trump administration officials are so interested and engaged with the Kennedy Center. They would far prefer that it was in the hands of more far left-leaning activist types, very artsy types. And they don't really like Rick Grinnell, who's heading up a lot of the changes over there. So they go in looking for things to be nitpicky about. For my part, I have been there. I actually went and saw The Sound of Music there a couple months ago. It was so fun, phenomenal performance. And The Sound of Music itself, it's one of my favorite movies. I grew up watching it. But at the Kennedy Center, it was really well done. It's tons of families, tons of kids, tons of older individuals that had gone to see it. It was just a really great experience. And, we hear all the time about all the developments coming up. So I only see good things happening over there. And I, for one, am delighted to have the national anthem before performances. And I love to hear it.
It can't hurt. And, if you're going to play the national anthem anywhere, it should be right here in the greatest country on the face of the planet. I mean, seems like a no-brainer to me. But there's a lot of shakeups happening over the Epstein files on Capitol Hill. And I know that you've been at the forefront of some of this reporting. But now that President Trump has signed the Epstein Files Transparency Act, how are Democrats reacting? Have you talked to anyone?
Well, Democrats don't talk to media that they don't view as fawning over them. So we have not a lot of chances to talk to them. But what I can say is many of them are starting to be a little nervous after pushing so hard to get these files. I mean, look, we saw the president over and over say this is a Democrat hoax. He got a lot of flack for that. What the White House told me last week, and we did a big story on this, is that he was never saying the files didn't exist, because anyone with a brain knows that they do. But what he was saying is that the Democrat interest in the files was the hoax. And, Obviously, he did not want them released. He made that very clear. But I think it is an interesting point to look at the fact that Democrats really, truly were not interested in Epstein or the files until this became a thing, until they viewed it as a weakness for the president. And now, and I know you've talked about this and Vince has talked about this, there's a lot of stuff coming out in the files showing that there were Democrats and high-profile left-leaning journalists and people on the left who were mentioned in the files and who actually had cozier relationships with Epstein than they're trying to say that Trump and other figures on the right had. So that's concerning on multiple levels. I talked to someone last week that was kind of, they were a person on the right, they were laughing and they were like, I think Democrats are getting some angry phone calls from some high profile people lately. Because look, you have people who were involved. Stacey Plaskett, for example, she was in this congressional hearing that had to do with the president. She's literally texting Jeffrey Epstein, seemingly receiving advice from him on what course to pursue. You got Jeffrey Epstein talking to other people about how to blackmail Trump, how to use things against him. So just multiple examples of these high profile people on the left who are more implicated than they would like to admit. So the White House is perceiving this as an opportunity. They're like, okay, well, you guys really wanted these out here. Let's show the people who are in your party, who are closely aligned with you, that were involved in this, that were implicated in these files. And they're really leaning into that. And, I talked to Donald Trump Jr. about this last week, actually, and he had a really interesting perspective. He said what many of us have said before: if there was anything truly incriminating the president of the United States, Donald Trump, in these files, it would have come out during the Biden administration, when the Biden administration just truly threw the book at the president and tried every way possible to land him in jail. They didn't have anything because it didn't come out. And so now we have these files and we are expecting them to be fully released very soon. I think we're going to see a lot less than most people online were hoping for. There's a lot of people out there that think we're going to get some perfectly curated list that's going to make high profile news and everyone can make their videos about it. But at the end of the day, they're going to redact the victims' names for sure. They're going to redact certain things that the DOJ feels are necessary to redact. So it's not going to be the big conspiracy theory laden present that everyone was hoping for. And I think some of us are going to be disappointed to see it, but I'm delighted that we're getting them. I think it's long overdue. And I think we're going to find even more that some people on the left and possibly the right are going to be upset about.
Yeah, I'm in the camp of full transparency. I don't care who gets implicated. If you're a bad guy, you're going down. That's all I care about. And I think most of the American people probably agree with me on that front. One more thing that I have for you, because I know that you have a scoop. So I wanted to get to your opinion on this, but there have been rumors, and of course the Democrats, they're jumping and glomming onto rumors when it's President Trump and the Epstein files or what have you. But also Erica Kirk went viral for hugging Vice President Vance, and when you watch the video of it, it's an innocent platonic hug, right? But they take a screenshot of just a moment of her kind of touching the back of his head. And now it's a whole rumor that Vice President Vance is leaving his wife for Erica Kirk. And that's what they're going with, which is beyond me. And then Second Lady Usha Vance was seen without her wedding band recently. And a spokesperson for Second Lady Usha Vance came out and said something to People and said, listen, she's a mom. She's washing a lot of dishes. She's changing diapers. She's doing sometimes you forget your ring. So you have a scoop on this. So I wanted your take.
Yeah, I think I got that statement before People did. So sorry, People. But look, Usha Vance, you see her all the time. She dresses very beautifully, but she dresses really simply. She's not very flashy. And I have a bunch of other pictures that we found showing Usha just forgets her ring sometimes. And that was what I learned when I talked to someone on her team, is that they said, she's a mom, just like they told People. She washes a lot of dishes and that's what happens. And what I found really interesting, Haley, is when I saw the first picture of someone being like, oh, where's Usha's wedding ring? My first thought was, oh, she probably took it off while she was doing dishes or something, because, I'm not trying to create a conspiracy theory. I'm not trying to create a narrative. I just, I'm thinking what the most realistic thing is. But of course I reached out to, like you just think, okay, like why would she not be wearing her wedding ring? So I reached out to her team and I was like, hey, is there like something here that I don't know about, or did she just forget her wedding ring? And so, we got the clarity on that. And I tweeted a couple photos showing that, yes, she forgets it on a number of occasions. And she's a busy mom and she forgot it. And I think, Haley, this really speaks to a number of the stories we've seen recently. And the Erica Kirk, JD Vance one is a really good example of this, where we really need to be so careful about how we consume news. Because if you're looking at news as how can I make this the most exciting for me, you're losing touch with what's going on, because our goal, and I think, every person in the age of the internet has a responsibility here, should be to understand the facts and the truth of it, not to take it to the next level and to hope that we can turn it into something that it's not. And look, I'm a journalist. I love a great story. I will love a good news cycle. But what I truly care is about the truth. And it makes me so upset and angry to see people weaponizing people who are grieving, like Erica Kirk, to see people jumping on narratives and pushing narratives because it's fun. And I had to say this to someone that I'm close with the other day, a friend. I said, look, this isn't fun for the people who are involved. It might be fun for you to guess and speculate, but don't forget there are real people involved. And it is really irresponsible of us to be pushing narratives that aren't real. Now, if it's true, if you have evidence to back it up, please tell me. I want to know. I want to write about it.
Right.
But don't be just guessing and pushing things, because these are real people involved.
Absolutely. And like you said, the truth matters, and excellent reporting from you as always. So where can people find more of your reporting and follow you for more?
Well, you can find my reporting at dailywire.com. We've got a lot of great journalists there, and we're really hustling. So check us out. And then if you want to see mine specifically, you can follow me at Mary Marg Olahan on X and Mary Margaret Olahan on Instagram. I post a lot of what I'm doing. So follow along. And Haley, you're killing it, by the way. Miss you. Wish we were still having dinner at some fun place in Nashville, but I know we will reunite soon.
I agree, but this is good for now. So Mary Margaret, thanks for joining me on Vince today.
Thank you.
I absolutely love her. Her reporting is top tier, so definitely make sure that you go find her at Daily Wire. So if you watch Nightly Scroll, you know that I end my show on some cute videos and some nice videos. So I wanted to show you just a few. So we'll start with number 16 here. Here's a grandma, her eyesight isn't too good. Take a look at this.
This guy on the right.
That's the president. That's Trump.
I didn't know he was black.
He's not. He's white. Do you think he's good looking?
No.
Hey, Granny doesn't have good taste in men. I will say that. And certainly she doesn't have good eyesight. But I will say, she's watching President Trump and she says, who is that man? I didn't know that he was black. I will note that she was watching CNN, and CNN has been known to up their orange quota a little bit on the monitor. So maybe if she watched another network, she would see President Trump in the right light. And, maybe he's a little orange, but he's not black. They say orange is the new black. Anyway. This next video is from a diamond store, a jeweler, and they have a Trump-shaped diamond. Look at this. In case my future husband is watching this, I'm just kidding. I would not say yes to this. This is crazy. I like Trump, but this is crazy. It is in the shape of President Trump's side profile. You could see his nicely, perfectly coiffed hair, and the iconic side profile of the 45th and 47th president. Would you say yes to this? You can let me know in the chat. I don't know if I would say yes to this. All right, one last video that I want to show for you guys. My fellow Christians out there, you see a crash on the side of the road. We do a little quick prayer, right, to say prayers for everyone who's involved in this. And whoever this little boy's parents are, they're doing a good job. They're starting him young. Look at this. He says, should we pray for them? There's some sirens in the back.
Pray that those guys will be safe and know what they're doing. And I pray that we'll closer to each other, closer to you. Amen.
Amen to that. Thought that was very cute. Thank you for watching me on Vince tonight. Of course, you can watch me on Nightly Scroll live at 6 p.m.